Welcome to Dilly, where we cheer to educated conservative conversation and values. My name is Christy McLaughlin. You can call me Christy. It is November 6th, 2020. We are 3 days into Election Day, and the American people are still unsure as to who the president-elect is of 2020. We, the people, certainly deserve better, to know that the election process has maintained its integrity. President Trump's campaign has been very confident in stating that so long as all legal votes are counted, and after the Supreme Court has reviewed the legal challenges against Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, of the widespread voter fraud allegations, that it will be clear that President Trump has won re-election. Meanwhile, former Vice President Joe Biden has been very confident in stating that he is currently the vice president-elect, despite the fact that many key battleground states have yet to call a winner, and the mainstream media has followed suit, announcing early that Vice President Joe Biden is the president-elect of 2020. We've always known that the mainstream media has been radical left and has tried to manipulate and propagandize the American people. However, Fox News in fact showed its true colors, calling Arizona substantially early, despite the fact that even CNN and the New York Times refused to call Arizona for Joe Biden. What resulted is dismayingly a lack of hope in the American people. The American people need to know that their vote matters, that their vote counts. And when the mainstream media manipulates results, while there's widespread allegations of voter fraud, it certainly can cause a very chilling atmosphere in the United States, not knowing whether our fundamental values and our constitutional rights will be maintained in the future. I've seen personally many Republicans on social media admit defeat days ago to Vice President Joe Biden. We call ourselves patriots. We are the defenders of the Constitution. In President Trump's greatest time of need, we need to be stronger than ever, not admit defeat. Patrick Henry famously said, "Give me liberty or give me death." Not, "Give me liberty, but if the election looks a little bit challenging, I'll shrug my shoulders and make a social media post in favor of Joe Biden." Patriots, we need to stand up and stand together. What we are seeing is a complete coup d'etat through voter fraud. We expected this to happen. President Trump has been stating this for the last year, that this was very likely going to happen, that the left would try to steal the election. But now it is our time to stand up. President Trump has defended us for 4 years. We must defend President Trump. Win or lose, most importantly, we must defend the Constitution, not only for ourselves, but for future generations. They will thank us for this. Patriots, we still have the opportunity to donate to President Trump and his legal defense fund. We have the opportunity to donate our time by poll watching. We also have the opportunity to share relevant information of the voter fraud allegations. Social media is very good at censoring us. Facebook is probably the most thorough in shadow banning conservative content, but Twitter as well. And it is our duty to continue to spread the news like wildfire, because our president needs us right now. With me today, I have Gineen Bresso. She is an elections expert. I absolutely adore this woman, an elections attorney who is so brilliant, and she will be discussing what to expect in President Trump's legal challenges for the key battleground states. Take a look. Thank you so much for joining me, Gineen. Gineen is an elections attorney. What are your thoughts right now in key battleground states like Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona?
Well, look, everything is so fluid. I mean, from last night, the president was up in Pennsylvania. You wake up this morning and he's behind. So I think, we have to wait until the votes are certified. But certainly in some of these key battleground states, you're looking at a couple of things. One, potential recounts. For example, in the state of Georgia, in order to have a recount, it is 0.5% of the vote totals between the two candidates that would automatically trigger that. And you're also looking at Pennsylvania when we get the final vote totals, whether or not that could potentially go to recount. And then you have, these lawsuits that have been filed and legal challenges by the Trump campaign, where they're seeking to ensure that the election officials are actually following the law, whether it's with observation. And obviously in Nevada, there are allegations that there are roughly about 10,000 ballots that were cast by people who do not live there and potentially dead people. So I think there's a lot in play. So certainly over the next couple of hours, next couple of days, things will turn and be quite interesting.
So as it stands right now, my understanding in Georgia is that there's approximately less than 1,500 votes separating Joe Biden and President Trump. Joe Biden is leading right now. However, they still have approximately 9,000 military ballots to count. Is that correct?
I have not seen the actual vote totals as of yet, but if that's accurate, military and overseas ballots, will be counted. They believe there is a time where if they're postmarked by election day, there's a grace period for them to come in to be
Okay,
processed and tabulated.
that's great. So there's still a chance with Georgia. What are your thoughts when you see Fox News, for example, announce Arizona early, while the New York Times and CNN actually refuse to announce Arizona as for Joe Biden?
I mean, that
Go ahead.
Sure. No, that was very interesting. That was one of the things when you were sitting there election night watching the returns, you're like, why would, a network call it so early while the others don't? Because certainly you don't want to be in a situation in 2000 where networks are retracting their calls when they did for Gore and then had to pull it back. So certainly, these networks are relying on their data, but it, very well could have been premature, because I think the fact that the New York Times and CBS were not calling Arizona, at that time, and still aren't, there's still ballots to be counted. And I think they should wait and take the time for the process to work itself out before they know for sure to call a state for a president or call a race for a particular candidate.
I know there's a lot of frustration amongst President Trump supporters, mainly because it's extremely dismaying to see Fox News, which was one of our only outlets left to have some sincere conservative values represented in a main network, start to announce that Joe Biden is winning in a state when there's so much fluidity, as you said, in the state. So when you see that kind of despair coming from patriots, what is your message to them, especially when it comes to these legal allegations? Is there a fighting chance? What can we expect?
Well, certainly, if election officials are not following the laws, then, certainly the president and his campaign have the right to lodge challenges, to make sure that, the votes are counted properly. Look, pre-election, you have roughly, 300 lawsuits that were filed across the state by the liberals and their allies seeking to completely change the elections process in each state to advantage their side. Now we're looking at the president and his campaign who are filing lawsuits to ensure that election officials are following the law. So certainly, the American people deserve not only to know that there is confidence in the elections process and that there's transparency. I mean, this whole issue where observers are being restricted access to watch the ballot processing and tabulation is absurd. I mean, you have Pennsylvania, you have Michigan, you have, Arizona, and also they say Nevada now there are issues with people being allowed in the counting rooms to watch the signature verification process. I mean, this is something that the American people need to know and have confidence in. In fact, if you go back to the 2016 election in Broward County, Florida, here in our home state, Brenda Snipes was not following the law. In fact, she would kick out the Republican poll watchers that were watching the signature verification process after the first half hour, and then would not let the public or anybody view that process. And it was only until the Florida Republican Party had threatened to file a lawsuit that she actually opened up the process so there was transparency. You know, the American people are watching. This is a very, very close race. I mean, the fact that the media was reporting a blue wave, we know now was ludicrous. So certainly, you know, particularly with close races, you want to make sure that all legal votes are counted. And certainly, if there are questions to that, whether it's Nevada, where you have people who are not eligible to vote, or potentially other states where there may be election irregularities, you know, they should certainly be brought before the court and resolved.
So let's just briefly, since I know you are short on time, just briefly discuss what we can expect if we do prevail in courts, if President Trump does prevail. Um, if he can establish that there's enough voter fraud, he would have to have the amount of fraudulent votes match or exceed the difference in which Joe Biden has supposedly won the state, correct?
That's right. I mean, in order to overturn an election, you have to show that there were, you know, more than enough votes that would change the overall outcome. So certainly, but there are other aspects of election administration are being challenged. For example, in Pennsylvania, you have the campaign challenging the observation process because there were Republican counties that were allowing their, you know, poll watchers to observe the process. But as we know, in Philadelphia, even after a court order, they were still not allowing the Trump campaign folks in to observe. So certainly there, I think there could potentially be an equal protection argument as well. It'll be very interesting to watch how this flows through the courts to see if in fact this does go to the Supreme Court to be resolved.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gineen. I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to go ahead and put President Trump's donation links down below if you're interested. I will also put a link where you can volunteer for President Trump's campaign in his greatest time of need. Take the time, Patriots. You won't regret it.